Welcome back, everybody. This part of the conversation is going to be very educative and informational, and I hope you will learn a lot from it. We are going to explore how to repair the fractured relationship between the African and the African American. So I'm going to give you a minute. Call your co-workers, call your friends, get your kids, get your mother. Everybody get in here because we do have something to say, okay? And I hope that at the end of this exercise, we'll be able to take away from here how practical steps on how we can actually develop a more positive relationship between each other, because we sincerely believe that the only way Africa can come out of the doldrums is if we unite the divided house of Africa. That means that all Africans in the diaspora come together, look out for each other's interests economically and socially, and in whatever way we can do to elevate each other and elevate the mother continent. To help me do this is a professor who is well vested in the history of Africa, in the concerns, the social and economic concerns of Africa, even the politics of it. So I'm going to bring Dr. Akil Khalfani into the studio and then have him talk to us about his take on the relationship between the African and the African American. Okay, let me say the African immigrants and the African Americans. Okay, Dr. Khalfani. Dr. Khalfani, can you hear us? You are welcome to Office of the Citizen. It's a pleasure to have you with us, okay? Office of the Citizen talks about issues that concern Africa and concern Nigeria, but we are all one so far. So let's talk about it. Tell us about yourself and what you do in a nutshell before we start.
Okay, very good. First of all, I want to just say I'm glad to be here and honored, really. And I want to thank you for taking the time to bring this important issue to bear, right? Because a lot of times people are not willing to address this issue, especially on a public level, because we have some tensions that are necessarily between us, but we need to break down those things. So I'm a professor of sociology and African studies at Essex County College here in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I, spent a lot of time working with brothers and sisters from the continent and in the diaspora around the world. So in Brazil, in different parts of the United States, in Europe, wherever we are is where the people are that I'm working with. And as you mentioned before, yes, I have a relation. I'm the Pan-African Diaspora Ambassador to the ONI in Ile-Ife. And I have I sit on a bunch of different boards and in a bunch of different capacities here in the United States. One is I sit on what's called the Human Relations Commission, and I'm an author. I wrote a book called The Hidden Debate, which looks at the truth. It explores the difference between the relationship of African Americans and European Americans and how what happens when we talk about things like affirmative action, happens when we talk about trying to address issues of liberty, equality, and justice.
Okay, so have you been to Africa before?
Yes. I've been to Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Botswana. I actually lived in South Africa while I was in grad school. Studied at the University of Pretoria, studying Zulu and Afrikaans. So, ek kan praat en verstaan de bietjie Afrikaans en ingi kuluma isi Zulu kancane.
What language is that?
That's Zulu.
Okay. Oh, nice. All right. Okay. So, the crux of this discussion today is, why does it seem that there is a fractured relationship between the African immigrant, the African and the African American? What is going on? We're supposed to all be children of one race, the Black people. So why is it that there is some kind of disdainment or some kind of resentment between the African immigrant and the African American? What is going on? Do you understand that picture? Do you agree that this is going on? And tell me your understanding of that situation.
Yeah, so definitely there's elements of that going on, and it's our responsibility to explore, to analyze, and to really kind of figure out how do we resolve those issues, right? So that some of those, the main thing that we need to understand is that the underlying nature of that conflict
Yeah.
comes from the whole colonial process, right? So that when if you look at Things Fall Apart, that book is a great piece for us to begin to look at and see where the origins are. And at the beginnings of the colonial enterprise, the objective was to break down and to really to destroy the African foundation of who we are as a people. And so then there was an imposition of white supremacy and racism. And oftentimes what happened is that we internalized a lot of that. And in internalizing that, then we began to reenact or to carry out the whims and wishes of our oppressors. And so that's had a long history that has been going on for for hundreds of years. And so when you look at what's going on in the continent, and when you look at what's going on here in the U.S., you see, or in other places where we are as Africans, you see that there's sometimes disdain, there's sometimes miseducation, and ill-informed things. And you as a media person know that the images that are in media have a direct impact on how people perceive things.
So,
And so,
so you think
so say,
so?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you think that the African American is misinformed about the reality of the African because they seem to think that nothing good can come from that side. They feel that Africans come here to be parasitic on whatever they have been able to, gain or win from the marchings, from the protests, from the civil rights movement. They feel that we are coming here as parasites on those things they have been able to secure for themselves, and they're very resentful of that. But then if you look at the African immigrant, a majority of them who come here are very well educated, come here with several degrees, come here and excel. So where do they get that from?
So I think we have to be very careful with drawing broad brushes, right? So that we can't say what all African Americans and what all Africans come here as. Some Africans from the continent, recent migrants. First of all, we're all Africans. We all came here. We
Yes.
all came at different time periods,
Yes.
right? So that there's Africans who came prior to enslavement. Right, there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole group of Africa. The earliest Africans in the Americas were these Africans in Brazil who were here over 9,000 years ago. So I think we have to make sure that we're careful about the nuances of this discussion, because otherwise we feed into the misperceptions that are already out there. And I think that those misperceptions you're talking about, they go on all sides,
Yeah.
right? So I've been teaching students for over about 20 years.
Yeah.
And so in the thousands of students that I've interacted with, from the continent and from the islands, they oftentimes say that when they come here, that parents tell them, don't associate with those African Americans, don't associate with those people because of X, Y, and Z. So there's this perception when
Mm-hmm.
coming here sometimes about things. And as I go back to what I was saying originally, that perception comes from what people see in TV. And then on the other side, here that you have the same kinds of reality, right? So that the perception about what and who Africans are, that some, not all, some African Americans have this perception that's put in the media about the undeveloped and the this and the that and negative sides of things. And so we both have to address those negativities that are presented by the wider society, and we have to come up with our own understandings of each other. That's why I travel to the continent. That's why I work with people. That's why I take students to the continent so that they can experience it and see for themselves, come up with their own analyses and understandings of things, learning the language, learning the history, learning the culture.
Yes.
But when you look at the piece that you're talking about, that when people come over here, and a lot of people come with degrees, we have to differentiate between immigrant populations
Mm-hmm.
and non-immigrants. So that if you look on the continent
Yes.
and you look at the African Americans who've migrated and live now in Nigeria and Ghana and South Africa and Kenya and all over the place, that their experiences are different than the Africans who are there. Because as migrants, there's a different motivation, there's a different insight and understanding about things. So
Yeah.
we confuse sometimes. I'm a sociologist by training, so right,
Yeah.
that's I have my master's, my bachelor's, and PhD in sociology,
Yeah.
studying race relations and solutions to social problems, particularly for people of African descent. And so, in understanding these things, that we've got to look at it from a different perspective. We've got to understand that migrants migrate for a particular reason,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that their motivations are sometimes different than those who are non-migrants or non-migrants. So that if you look on the continent, that some people who you run into may have the same kind of characteristics as you think that you see African Americans have. The same is true when you go to Europe. You have, or you go to Asia. There's people in all different categories, and we can't just lump people together and say, "Oh, that's how they are." But that's typically what happens in the news media and other media, even on TV shows that we see. And then there's these perceptions that people get. You know, when I went to South Africa for the second time, maybe the third time, I had a young man who came up to me and said, uh, he says, "You know what? I see you guys. You guys all have limousines and big houses." And I said, "No, that's a perception that you've got. You've been watching TV, and so then your perception from TV has confused your reality. So that there's the whole gamut. There's poor people, there's rich people, there's middle class people, there's educated people, there's uneducated people." And
Mm-hmm.
you go to Nigeria, the same thing. You have poor people, you have educated people, you have middle class people,
Mm-hmm.
and so then we have to look at the whole gambit of who we are as a people and appreciate the diversity of
Mm-hmm.
what we as African people bring to the table. Otherwise, we are simply buying into a European paradigm that says that this one is bad and this one is worse, and we get confused about it. And that's why, when you look at what our brothers and sisters who came to the U.S. to study, such as Nkrumah, Ezekiel, and so many others, when
Mm-hmm.
they went back with a Pan Africanist idea. They went back with a Pan Africanist mentality, because when you look at the idea of Pan Africanism, it
Mm-hmm.
actually evolved but really the first person who was a Pan Africanist and came up with the word was Henry Sylvester Williams, who was from Trinidad. He was a lawyer from Trinidad, and then from there you had a Jamaican,
Yeah.
Marcus Garvey, who spent a lot of time in the United States, and but had still to this day the largest African organization worldwide, was the UNIA. And
Okay.
then you had Du Bois,
Yeah.
right? And Du Bois continued with 5 Pan Africanist congresses.
Yes.
And those are the things that we have to look at in terms of where did those people go? Du Bois is buried in Ghana today.
Okay. But there's a school of thought that thinks that the Pan African movement did not really catch on to the among the Africans. It didn't catch on because there was no spiritual awakening of what it means to be African. They did not quite understand or embrace the concept. What do you think was responsible for that, and how can we start um, motivating people or enabling them to understand the concept of Pan-Africanism and from there embrace it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the truth about the matter is it goes back to the colonial whole divide and conquer, right? The Igbos are different from the Hausas, who are different from the Fulani, who are different from the Yoruba, and they're all confined within the border of what's called Nigeria, or they're confined in another. But these borders were artificial. In 1884 and 1885, when the Berlin Conference happened, that's when these borders were divided up, and people who were separate before for one reason or another, that they were forced together, and then you had conflicts that ensued.
Mhm.
And that happened all over the continent. You know, the people in Botswana, I mean, if we think about that, Botswana, right?
Yes.
That in Botswana, that people who were part of that group, because of the borders that were designed and set up by South Africa, by the Afrikaners and the British in South Africa,
Mhm.
that the border cut them in half, and they started a Bantustan, or a homeland called Bapatitswana. And so these were the same people. A large percentage of them were in Botswana, and a percentage of them were in South Africa. But during apartheid, they couldn't even go see their own family members
Okay.
because these false borders, and these false borders have corrupted our minds so that we see ourselves as different. You go to different places in Africa, go to their educational institutions, and ask their scholars and their students, how much do they know about the neighboring countries? How
Mm-hmm.
much do they know about the countries in South? If they're in West, do they know about East Africa? Do they know about Southern Africa? Do they know about North Africa? And how much do they know about African Americans or Africans in Britain or in Jamaica? We don't know each other's stories, so our ignorance about ourselves, globally speaking, creates a place where divide and conquer continues to be successful.
That's
The,
profound.
the
Yes.
same was true about colorism,
Mm-hmm.
right? That if you look in Brazil, the United States, and other places, that the European colonists they basically they suggested that you're better than the next one because you're lighter. You're better than the next one because your hair is less curly. You're better than the next one because now you speak English or French or Portuguese or Spanish. We bought into it,
Yeah.
and we've got to break ourselves out of the bastion of white supremacy.
Oh,
We don't love ourselves, and that love, actually hate for self, is part of the problem. Look
okay.
at the Belgian Congo. I mean, the hatred of self that was infused in there, that they would lop off people's feet and arms and hands
Yeah.
because they didn't produce enough. Whatever the crop was that was produced for they would make the babies watch the
Mm-hmm.
parents be tortured and brutalized.
Yes.
And they did the same thing in the Americas. So we've been traumatized and tortured and tormented, and we have got to heal from our trauma, the
Yes.
trauma of that continues to plague us today.
Yes. Okay. Now, in what ways do you suggest we could start healing from this trauma? Introduce history in schools, write books, get to know more about each other, and get to share more of our stories, get to understand a little bit more about each other. As a professor, I know you have several avenues that you could suggest that we could start, knowing a little more about each other.
Yes, yes. So there's several elements. One is that, those of you who are in the media, making movies and the like, where are the positive images of Africans in the diaspora in Nollywood,
Uh-huh.
right? That Nollywood has the power at this point to create positive, uplifting stories about how we see ourselves as people.
Mm-hmm.
What stories do we want to? The most of the stories and the images that have been portrayed about us have been portrayed by others, but people like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey and all the folks in Nollywood, we have the power now to
Mm-hmm.
be able to tell our own stories in ways that are not dictated and controlled. Even the distribution is not controlled by others, and so
Yeah.
now we have the responsibility of telling those stories, of making it viable and important,
Mm-hmm.
um, in ways that other folks don't see it as important. That's why this whole thing about Black Lives Matter is poignant at this moment, because people's lives are not appreciated. By
Yeah.
saying Black Lives Matter, some people saying, well, white lives matter and yellow lives matter. And that's not the point. The point is that the humanity of people of African descent is not respected.
Yeah.
Abner Louima was not born here in the United States. Amadou Diallo was not born here in the United States, but his humanity, their humanity, was violated in the same way as the humanity of George Floyd. And
Mm-hmm.
until we recognize that people are not respecting our humanity and will violate us, will kill us, will maim us, will torture us, whether they're in the United States or in Britain or in France or on the continent, that we've got to come up with a new paradigm. We got to come up with a new approach, and we have to stop that self-hate, and we have to create a whole paradigm switch. That's what it takes. It takes a paradigm switch. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm pushing. That's what I've been pushing for years now, is
Okay.
that we have a paradigm switch, and that it has to be cultural, it has to be dietary, it
Yeah.
has to be political, social,
Mm-hmm.
historical. We've got to learn our histories.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the truth of what happened when Africans were sold from the continent or stole from the continent and brought here. Let's
Okay.
talk about the truth of what happened once we got here. What happened? The migration of all the Africans from the continent. Nigeria is one of the largest sending populations of Africans to the U.S. today,
Okay.
and that is possible is because of the struggles of folks from the 1960s. Go back to the 70s. Go back to the 60s. There was no huge influx of Nigerians or Africans from the islands or from the continent coming to the Americas
Okay.
because you couldn't come here.
Okay. 1 second.
Those brothers and sisters
One
who
second.
died then made
One
it
second, bro.
possible.
1 second. Now you said go back and know the truth of the history of what happened when people were sold off to the Americas. We would also do well to know the truth of the consequences of this process on the African population that was left behind. How the
Yep.
societies were distorted and made dysfunctional. How technology could not grow because there was no settling. How populations needed to flee from one end of the place to, flee all over the place because they were running away from the slave traders and the slave masters who had guns. So we should not forget the impact of that on the populations that were left behind. Now, the story continues from where you left off, that in the 1960s, when they arrived here and fought for their rights, please go ahead with that, because I am expecting that we'll come to the rights that the African
Well,
population.
no. Let's go back to the point you're making, because this is an important point, because
Okay.
we have to think about that. This is the slave trade from
Yes.
Europeans and Arabs was hundreds of years long and had a huge impact on the continent. In
Yes.
particular, the European slave trade, they didn't just take anybody. If you look who the people they brought here, they brought people who were ironsmiths. They
Yeah.
brought people who knew how to grow. If you go to South Carolina today,
Yeah.
the people who came from Sierra Leone, they were rice growers. The Europeans didn't know how to grow rice, but they knew these Africans knew how to grow it. So they brought people here
Yeah.
who had the skill set of doing something that they couldn't do. And
Mhm.
so therefore, they brought specific people to do specific things. And when we look at it that way, then we become to understand that there was a whole depopulation. There was a brain drain, an intentional brain drain that was happening. And so then those become the things that we have to look at in terms of why and how it happened. And we have the ability to change that, but we have to when we recognize that there was this intentional disruption of culture, disruption of history,
Yeah.
that then we begin to see it, and then the people that they put in place were the neo-colonial compradors, if you will. These were the folks who they put in power, who continue the destabilization of Africa for the benefit of Europe, of the metropole.
Exactly. So the neo-colonialism that took root in the African population through that time, let's explore that, right? Because this ensured that raw materials, that every other thing kept leaving Africa in a one-way direction. This also
Right.
ensured that the people were mentally enslaved. So
Right.
in deconstructing that, in finding our Africanness, how can we use culture? How can we use culture to help, reawaken our identity as Africans, so that we can put
Yeah.
a stop to that belief that white is right, so to speak. But then when you're
Right.
talking about our culture, please consider that our culture has really been corrupted by the advent of religion and other things, making us not really authentically. I don't want to say authentically. Let me say purely African. Think on
Well,
those.
I mean, we have to look at it that even the ideas that we're Nigerian and Ghanaian. I mean, Ghana. If people understand the history, that Ghana is not the historical name. The Ghana Empire, it was all the way up by Mali, and the name was brought down there, right? So the names that even of the countries are erroneous. These were all things that were part of the colonial empire, but the Ghana as a name was one that Nkrumah adopted after, because it was called the Gold Coast, the Ivory Coast. These were things that they looked at, that they were beneficial, even the names, to Europeans. And when you look at the issue of when the colonialists began to set things up. Look at the train tracks in Africa. The
Yes.
train tracks in Africa don't connect African countries. They take stuff from the interior out of the continent. And so that was the intentionality of those who were in power.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Francophone African countries that they had until just recently, this year. Their money had to go to France before they could have control of their own currency. Now,
Yeah.
if that's not crazy, I don't know what is. Colonialism never ended.
Mm-hmm.
It was still going on. And so when you look at that, and then when you look at, you were talking about neo-colonialists,
Yeah.
look at Mobutu. Mobutu fleeced the DRC or Zaire at the time
Mm-hmm.
for years at the with the assistance of the U.S. government and other bodies in the West. And
Yes.
so we have to look at the impact of those things that have continued to happen and realize that those are the things that did it. But the solution is that we got to own the businesses
Mm-hmm.
and utilize those businesses. We have to have our governments that are going to be for the benefit of the people and
Mm-hmm.
not for the benefit of the few.
Mm-hmm.
Once we begin to share the wealth that's in the resources of our countries and develop stuff in the countries, we have got to stop sending raw materials to the West.
Yeah.
We can't say that if an ounce of gold, when it's gotten at the source, and I'm making these numbers up,
Mm-hmm.
is $2. By the time it's processed and sent out to any place else, that they've made $1,000, and
Mm-hmm.
then Africa gets a percentage of the $2. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
We can't allow other places and people to use our resource, our raw materials,
Mm-hmm.
without us having it turn in our hands 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do, is that our money, our resources has to be in our control. We have to look beyond our borders, and that, I don't just mean on the continent. That
Mm-hmm.
African Americans, Afro Brazilians, Afro Colombians,
Mm-hmm.
Africans in Europe, wherever we are as African people, we've got to begin to see how we can connect and build. You have some great farmers here in the United States, African farmers,
Yes.
and who don't get the same benefits. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
In the farm industry in the United States, to keep the prices locked at where they are, the United States government will pay corn growers and soybean growers not to grow, but they don't give those benefits for the most part to African American businesses. So that's how they stabilize the market, but we don't get to participate in that. But we have the skill set. So why don't we take our skill set and
Mm-hmm.
participate with Africans on the continent who may not have the machinery,
Mm-hmm.
who may not have the know-how how to have huge industrial farms,
Yes.
and partner, and then think about what we could do around the world. We
Yes.
don't need someone else to be to give us anything if we utilize the wealth of the arable land in Africa to
Yeah.
produce what we need, and
Mm-hmm.
then sell and trade it in Africa.
Yes.
Africa doesn't even grow. Some places in Africa don't even grow their own rice. They import tons and tons of rice,
Oh, and
but
there's
we eat
land too.
rice.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So you're making so much sense. Do you think that there's a willingness of a willingness by the African American to do these things in collaboration with the African? Is there such a willingness?
There's so much of a willingness that we've those things have already been started. All they need to do is be scaled up. There's been African Americans who moved to many different parts of the continent and have been doing business there and back and forth. I work with some of those brothers and sisters,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been doing amazing stuff. But it's about capacity building at this point, and
Yeah.
it's about understanding that we have the ability and the wherewithal to do it. And you said a key point before, though, and that is that we've got to believe in ourselves spiritually. We've got to look at our own spiritual and cultural systems and
Yeah.
value them.
Okay.
And we don't have to look to and for anybody else. Anybody can have whatever spiritual systems that they have, but we have our own set of spiritual systems throughout the continent. And that if we learn to love and appreciate them, we will begin to love and appreciate ourselves.
Oh.
And that's where it's going to start, is that once we love and appreciate ourselves and realize that our cultural systems have survived and thrived,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, take Yoruba or Ifa as a tradition. It survived and thrived all throughout the Americas. In Brazil, they called it candomblé. In Cuba and Puerto Rico, they call it Santeria and Lucami.
Mm-hmm.
Now it has different flavors, but
What
in essence, it's the
what
same thing.
what
And
do
they
you
go
know about?
to Nigeria and
Yeah.
they still participate.
What
There's
do
a
you know
whole
about
group of folks
Nigeria?
who follow the Akan tradition
Yeah.
in Ghana,
Mm-hmm.
but they're in the United States.
Mm-hmm. What do you know about the Ifa religion? What do you know about the Ifa religion?
Oh, I mean, I'm a practitioner. I'm a Egungun priest.
You're an
So
Egungun priest. What do you do as an Egungun priest?
well, Egungun is the ones who wear the masquerade, right?
Oh, so you went to masquerade. You have
That's what
won
we
that
do.
before?
Say that again.
You have won the masquerade.
Oh, most definitely.
Oh, okay. All right. Now,
But
people.
some things we keep close to breast.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But a majority of Nigerians watching this, right, will say the
Yes.
devil is a liar. Because in the minds of most Africans, the Christianity thing has taken so much, such deep roots that accepting our own traditional religious systems would almost
Yes. Yes.
mean like some kind of um, what would you call it? Like a forbidden thing to do where it concerns your Christian faith. So, how do we start from, or where do we start to encourage the African to embrace their own traditional religious systems?
Yeah. I mean, let's go back to Okonkwo, right? And things fall apart.
Mm-hmm,
That once the religion of the West came and the ideas and cultures of the West came,
mm-hmm.
things fell apart. But
Yes,
there's a friend of mine now who's his name is Takufu Zuberi, and he's writing he's doing I think a movie now
yeah.
talking about before things fell apart, right?
Okay.
And so the idea is that we can't just look at what happened when it fell apart. What were the things that were successful prior to the onslaught of white supremacy,
Mm-hmm,
prior to the onslaught of colonization?
mm-hmm.
Then we can begin to look at and identify the pathways to our thriving, because that's what it's about. See, before we were in the mindset and the pathway of trying to figure out how to survive,
Mm-hmm,
right? We had to survive. uh, um, I mean, think about being on the belly of the slave ship. No, I want to take us back even further. If you just look at Ghana, for instance, the
mm-hmm,
from the coast of Ghana to from Burkina Faso to the coast in Ghana is about 500 miles. And when I was in Ghana, I went there, and they have a right outside the border. They have a what they call a slave encampment,
mm-hmm.
and people had to walk those 500 miles to the coast,
Okay.
right? So that means that only a few survived because of what the way the treachery of the journey.
Yeah.
And then from there, they sat in those dungeons, right? Some people call them castles, but really they were dungeons for us, so that's what I call them. They sat in those dungeons for up to a month, and
Mm.
then they were in the bellies of a slave ship
Yeah.
for a month,
Yeah.
right? And then when they got there, they got to the auction block, and the women were molested and raped and tortured. Some of the people were thrown overboard because they didn't have enough food or because they rebelled.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they got there to here, then they were poked and prodded and portrayed all kinds of ways. But they survived, and now we are moving past survival food to thriving food. What
Yeah.
is it that we need to do to thrive? What
Yeah.
is it that we need to do to collectively excel? We can't be successful as African Americans. You can't be successful as Nigerians and Ghanaians and Brazilians and Afro Colombians and Afro Cubans without us working together,
Yes.
because will continue to be pulled apart, used against each other's, and
Yeah.
that's what's happened.
Okay. Okay. So, would you suggest that indigenous religions be introduced back into a school curriculum? And how do you make people understand that it's not demonic? Because there's a comment here that says that Santaria is demonic.
Santeria, yeah,
It's
yeah. Well,
invoking of
see,
moon
I
spirits.
I think that there's two things. One is that um, those comments come because people, first of all, the people who continue to utilize those systems, if you look at the core of them, talk to all the scholars, talk to the spiritualists. They understand the relationship. Now, there's some things that may have been corrupted in the process. There's some things that were changed or altered. You have in Nigeria, the kola nut is important, right? Well,
Mhm.
there was no kola nut here, so what did they use? Did they stop? Do you stop practicing because you don't have kola nut? No, they use coconut. And so sometimes people in Nigeria say, "Oh, they're using cola nut. They don't know what they're doing," but they didn't realize the severity of the condition and the innovation of the idea, right?
Yeah.
So they were being innovative in trying to continue their spiritualization. And
Yeah.
I understand that some people see it, interpret it as demonic, but sometimes on the continent, the same is true. When if you go to folks who are practicing the traditional spiritual systems, and there's all kinds of different ones all throughout Nigeria, all throughout Ghana. There isn't just one. Ifa is just one, right? The each cultural group or tribe, whatever you want to label it, has a different spiritual system, a
Mhm.
different name for the creator, or similar, right? Benin is very similar to what's practiced in Yoruba, but Olokun in Benin is different than Olokun in Ile Ife.
Okay.
And so we just need to think about the differences and how they're portrayed, right? So if you go to Ouida, they talk about voodoo. And
Yeah.
so you talk about voodoo, people get scared. Why? Because the West has portrayed it as something that's negative. But actually, voodoo is one of the oldest spiritual systems on the planet.
Yes.
And so and the main things about it are air, water, fire, and earth.
Mhm.
Those are the basic elements of it. The
Mhm.
basic elements of the Ifa tradition deal with Iwapele,
Mhm.
right? Good character,
Okay.
good. And so that we want to make sure that we are focused on those things as opposed to the things that other people try to redirect us to.
Okay.
That the Christian interpretation by Europeans of Eshu, for instance, is that Eshu is the devil. But
Mhm.
that's not what Eshu means. Eshu is the caretaker of the crossroads. Eshu is the trickster. Eshu is but the European idea about it tried to create something that it wasn't.
Okay.
That the European interpretation of it was Eshu with horns. Eshu historically never had horns, but that's what happened after colonization. So
Okay.
we have to go back to our understandings of our history and culture before white supremacy was on the table.
Okay, now let me read another comment. Another comment here. Oh, from my executive director, from our executive director. He says, okay, Mr. Wale Ajibade, have a very good afternoon to you. He says, but the US already provided the AGOA as an advantage that is largely ignored here, significantly lacking participation by the African Americans. We have all the tools in place. Our leaders on both ends are distracted. If we can find the right course through the right channel, there is a bright light at the end of the tunnel. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, he should explain maybe what he means. All of your listeners might not know what he's talking about by the AGOA.
All right. Please tell us what the AGOA is, Mr. Wale. We'll come back to you. Dr. Akil, let me come. What's the meaning of your name? Akil Khalfani. Who gave you
Yes,
that?
well, let me tell you my full name. My full name is Akil Kokayi Khalfani, which means intelligent, one who uses reason to summons the people who are destined to rule. So
Oh,
my name is the mission. My name is a charge for me,
oh,
right? So that Nkrumah had a charge,
yes.
Harriet Tubman had a charge,
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X had a charge, Marcus Garvey had a charge, Kenyatta had a charge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nelson Mandela had a charge, and so that my charge is to pull the people together. So that's what I've been doing for the last 30 plus years,
Yeah.
is pulling the people together, is finding ways. Oftentimes people want to find the negative part. I want to find the positive part. People want to find what the things are that divide us. What are the things that are the problems? I want to find the things that are the solutions. Let
Yes.
us focus on solutions for a change. We
Okay.
know the problems. We know that we have self hate. We know that we have issues about color. We know that we have issues about your hair is straight and this one is not. We know all those things. So why do I need to focus on them? I don't need to focus on those things. I
Yeah.
need to focus on the things that are going to say, how do we get to the place where I have enough trust in you and you have enough trust in me so that we can have strong
Exactly.
business relationships, so
Yeah.
that we can call on each other. If you're a Christian and I'm a traditionalist, we can still pray to our creator to bring about change,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't have to pray because you're this, that for my demise. Let your prayers be about our collective upliftment and let us spiritually be where we are. Malcolm X said, put your religion in the closet and let's focus on the fact that we are Africans. And I
Yes.
think that in part, he's right.
Yes.
But because my spiritual practice shouldn't impede you from understanding that you can and need to work with me, because we have to confront collectively racism, white supremacy, poverty, all these things we have to confront together.
Yeah.
But we get stuck on the other things and we can't move forward.
All right. So, oh, well, that's very profound. Thank you so much. Let me ask you, how is it that when this might seem like ill-informed or not, really a good understanding of the situation. But how is it that when Africans come here, they tend to excel? There is an enabling environment out here. So when most Africans get here, they kind of run with it. So that has been like a crux of the matter between the African immigrant and the African American, who say that they feel that the Africans come here and look down on them, asking them, well, why don't you, asking them for personal accountability, asking them, how come you don't seize the opportunities, on ground here? How come we are able to come from out there and do something with our lives here? What is going on? Please talk to me about that. And there's a component of a mental situation going on after 400 years of slavery, but I'm sure you will be able to put that in a better perspective for us. And after that, we will talk about Africa. How come there's no enabling environment and everything out there in Africa? And how come you were able to go to Africa and do better than those of us that were in Africa?
I think you answered your own question there, right? And that is that it goes back to my original point about migrants. Mm-hmm. So me as a migrant, immigrant going to Africa, having excelled here already and going there, I had cachet. Doors would open for me in ways that they wouldn't open for people who are there. Yeah. When I was in South Africa in January, we went to the townships, lots of impoverished people, mm-hmm. lots of lack and lots of need. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't my experience because that's not how I came there. Yeah. So if the majority of Nigerians who are poor came to the United States, poor and uneducated, what do you think their experiences would be? Very similar to African Americans, because they don't have those same types of things in place. And so then we have to look at who's migrating to be clear about it in terms of what's happening. And so then when migrants come here, it's not just African migrants. Look at Latino migrants, right? Look at Indian migrants from India when they come here. Look at European migrants that come here, that they have an opportunity to excel better than some of their European counterparts. Mm-hmm. So we're confusing the idea about migrants with the idea about people who are already here. There's thousands of poor whites here who don't do as well as Ivana Trump. Yeah. Right? Ivana Trump is an immigrant, but she has the benefit of how she came here. Yes. As opposed to the poor whites who are in trailer parks in the United States. They're never going to do as well as she's done. Why is that? But we don't make that same kind of comparison because we're looking at somebody else telling the narrative, mm-hmm. and the narrative that they're telling is just that, those African Americans are not doing well because we're comparing apples and oranges. And we don't, and so therefore, since we make that comparison in that way, me going to Africa and all the brothers and sisters who have degrees, think about the medical doctors who went to Africa. Mm-hmm. But then you got other Africans who are already there who can't get a job. Mm-hmm. What is that telling you? It's telling you that there are migrants coming there. There's opportunities available to them, and they have the desire to push in ways that other people don't have them. May not have the same desire to push or don't have the same ways in which they're treated. So, for instance, when I go to the continent or I go to the islands, yes, people might treat me differently because they know that my accent or how I dress or how I look or whatever else, and so I could do something that would be wrong, and they may not treat me as harshly as they would a Nigerian, or as they would a Ghanaian, or as they would a Sudanese, mm-hmm. right? And but coming here, the same is true. When people from the continent or islands interact with the police, in general, they don't treat them as harshly as they treat African Americans. They know the difference. They know how you talk. They know how we talk. And so when they see people with an accent, sometimes they give additional a little bit of room
Mm-hmm.
that they wouldn't give if they knew you were from here. And so then racism has this way of playing itself out to the benefit of some folks and to the and against other folks. And we have to look at those nuances
Yeah.
of racism and white supremacy before we make a broad, sweet
Yeah.
statement about what's going on.
Okay, so we now find that AGOA is African Growth Opportunity Act. Going back to the comment that was made by our executive director, right? Is there's
Yes.
significantly lacking participation by African Americans in the African Growth Opportunity Act. Do you want to say a few things about that?
Well, I mean, I have to limit my comment on that because I don't know. I haven't read the that particular act, so I don't know it well enough to comment on it.
Yeah.
But I would just say that we have um, uh, a history of Africans and African Americans working together. It's not, some people want to suggest that there's all tension, but that's not true. When Fela came here, he connected with a sister who helped him to understand some things about the experience here, and that's how he changed some of his songs and his movement to be more progressive. But we
Yeah.
forget about those things. In Nkrumah, he went to an African HBCU. That's where he went to school. So he was very close in front with what was going on in the African American community. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that those are the kinds of experiences that, if you come here and you only associate with or mostly associate with Europeans or within your own group, then I think that sometimes you end up with a perception that is different. But if you come here, and I have lots of friends who are engaged in the African American community,
Mm-hmm.
and their experience is very different. And so when I go to the continent, I go home. To me, Africa is my home. That's where I may have been here for many generations as a people, but in reality, that time period is limited to the thousands of years that my ancestors were in Africa.
Yes. Okay. So there's a comment here that says, for us to work together, we must learn more about each other, just like you said. We do not know each other enough. The seed of distrust is deep rooted between us and the fruit of suspicion, and we are constantly fed with this. We have to identify these misperceptions that keep us divided and undo them. Right. He just wrapped it all, everything that you have said, he put it all together in
Yeah.
statement. We see that you
So,
have gotten up. We're not done with you. We're not done with you.
no, I'm not going anywhere. I just need to get my power cord. My battery was dying.
Okay. All
Sorry. So no, I think that we've got to. Some people might say that I am overly optimistic, or that I am that I'm naive.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm far from naive. I've been in this struggle for many, many years and many, many different ways and levels. And if I was naive, I wouldn't have been successful as the director of the Africana Institute for nearly 15 years. If I was naive, I wouldn't have the books out and be doing the things that I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
If I was naive, then maybe somebody else might be able to do other types of things in terms of the way I think and do about things. But I'm not naive. I'm a strategist. I am a worker. And what I am is that I'm a believer that we will succeed.
Oh,
Right. So that's why I'm running for office. Right? I'm running for Congress, U.S. Congress in the United States, because I am committed to transforming the relationship of us as African people and the United States in its relationship to people of African descent, and what's going on in our community and
oh,
what's going on around the world as related to us. And so those are the things that I think that we've got to work hard on
mhm.
to create a different reality. If we don't do it, if we don't dream the big dream, then
Mm-hmm.
who will?
Okay.
Should I only think that, well, if I get, see, some people want us to relegate it to, I made it, I got my money, so just forget it. No, I'm not going out that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as many people who may want that to be the reality, and cast aspersion to suggest that we should just that that the divide between us is so deep. The divide between us is no deeper than
Okay.
the divide that we allow to be between us.
Let
And
me
so
take
if we focus on that, then that's where it'll continue. But
Okay,
I'm
let me
gonna
take you to Africa. Let me take you back to Africa because you
yes,
were a professor of African studies. Now,
yes,
tell me, you must know or you have observed the fractured societies in Africa. There is
yes,
so much going on in terms of insecurity, in terms of um, ethnic wars, in terms of corruption, major corruption that denies the people basic amenities, basic education, basic healthcare. There is so much going on. From your studies, what do you think is responsible for this? I mean, we know that there's a mindset of, wanting to amass whatever is considered um, like riches from in the Western world, what the West defines as riches. So there's
yes.
a thought process or a penchant to amass wealth. What can we do to stem the corruption? What can we do to make the African understand that there is need for him to be his brother's keeper? What can we do
Yeah.
to make them turn their values around? Like you said, a paradigm shift. What can we do to get the African to understand that he must rescue his community, he must rescue himself by being there, by providing, by building? What do you say to that? Because you must see what is going on in Africa right now with all the turmoil that we are observing from out here.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, the corruption, the internal violence,
Mm-hmm.
um, those things are monumental. But I would say that they're not devoid of outside influence, right?
Oh,
The who are those leaders, right? And how did they get to where they are?
yes.
Uh, I mean, let's go to Mobutu, for instance. Mobutu is a great prime example,
Yeah.
right? That the person before Mobutu was killed because of a CIA plot. And the person who was in charge of the plot says it in a documentary called Cuba, An African Odyssey. He tells how he was planning the plot.
Mm-hmm.
And then they changed the plot, but then uh, uh, embedded all the undermining processes of colonialism and imperialism and white supremacy uh, in that country for many years. And it's largely about resources.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the border of Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi and the DRC today,
Mm-hmm.
that border on the eastern portion of Africa is where so many resources are that the West wants to continue to control and Asia wants to continue to control, that they will do whatever they can to keep disunity and conflict going on. And
Mm-hmm.
we've got to realize that who are the people that are playing into those things, and why is it that we haven't, why have we not taken, I've talked about railroads before, why have we as Africans, now we've been in office for so long, taken and built railroads from Cairo to Cape Town, connecting Africa internally
Yeah.
from Nigeria to Kenya,
Yes.
right? We have the wherewithal to do those things, and we could and we should do them. And that becomes the place that, a lot of, look at these young folks who are pushing today,
Mm-hmm.
who are raising questions across the African continent, and those who are Africans from the continent but are in the diaspora right now,
Mm-hmm.
who are pushing the envelope and are striving to come home and bring revolutionary changes to the continent. And
Yeah.
that's who we're going to have to look to bring about the change, because they're going to come with a different mindset. Look
Yes.
at the protests in the United States. In in New Jersey alone, last weekend, I was told there were 140 protests and marches and rallies just over the weekend in New Jersey, and the
Mm.
majority of those were what? Young folks. And I think we have to open the door to allow young folks to come in and begin to do some revolutionary changes of ideas and thought. Go back to uh, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Those they were young folks. They died in their 30s.
Hmm.
They started in their 20s. Nelson Mandela was a young man before he went to prison. Winnie Mandela was a young sister who fought hard. And then we see that as the example, not just the revolutionaries, but the music makers, the playwrights, that these were for the most part young folks. And us, as we get older, what we need to do is we need to be comfortable and willing to have what's called succession planning. We have to be willing to step down and allow the young folks to come in with new ideas
Yeah.
and guide and direct them and not control it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. We're so caught up on money and power and greed
Yeah.
that we get stuck on those things.
Hmm.
Somebody in your feed said something about corruption. Yeah, corruption comes from those things. We got to go back to Iwapele. In ancient Kemet, they called it Medu Nefer,
Hmm.
right? Divine speech. We have to speak with divine words, and we have to act in that way. And
Yeah.
once we begin to go back to those basic African principles of Ubuntu,
Hmm.
right? Ubuntu is a Southern African concept. It's all throughout the continent, but in essence, it means that we are, therefore I am, therefore we are. There's a proverb that says, moto ke moto ka bato, and it means that basically that your humanity is spoken to and restored by how humanely you treat your neighbor.
Exactly.
If we understand that the other African proverb says that you can't have 10 until your neighbor has 9,
Exactly.
that if we understand that we have to lift as we grow, then we change the reality. It's not about just grow, grow, grow personally, that my success is dependent on my neighbor's success. And I'm going to lift my neighbor as much as I lift myself and not step on my neighbor's head, but use my neighbor to help him and help her to help me. And then collectively we change the world. And that's how it has to happen. The same problems that plague Africa plague Africans in America.
Yeah.
The same problems that plague Africans on the continent and in the U.S. plague Africans in the islands.
Yes. Okay. Wow, these were very profound words and very profound ideas, and I hope that our viewers and our listeners will, have been able to take a thing or two away from here. I thank you for spending your afternoon with us. In closing, any last words for us, any take-home words for us from here on before we say goodbye to you?
Yes. I think that we've got to have an environment of collective work and responsibility, right?
Yeah.
That we are responsible to each other.
Yes.
That we then share that, and we responsible for our economics together. It
Yeah.
can't just be about how much money, how many cars can you have,
Mm-hmm.
how many houses can you have, and especially when your neighbor has nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to get beyond being selfish and move to being selfless.
Yes.
I want to end on this. There's a brother who wrote a book. His name was Derek Bell.
Yes.
And in this book, the book is called Ethical Ambitions. And he raises an important and profound question in the beginning. He says, how do I maintain my integrity while seeking success?
Mm-hmm.
And in doing whatever you're doing, you got to have passion.
Yeah.
In addition to have passion, you have to have humility.
Yes.
You have to have courage. You have to have courage to take risks.
Yeah.
And then in the end, he says that success is not individual, success is collective.
Mm-hmm.
So that when I am successful as a candidate and I become a member of Congress, success is not me getting into office. Success is once we're in office and we're changing the fabric of American society.
Yes.
That's what success is, that when we collectively gain something that's bigger than me being in office makes me, empowers me to be a tool of the people.
Yes.
See, that's what I want to be. I want us all to be tools of the people. When we realize that we're tools of the people, we're servants of the people,
Hmm.
that then what we do changes the world because we are willing to sacrifice for ourselves, not just stand in front of a bullet, but to do something to move beyond the pale of where we are today to change the world in a systemic way. Because that's where racism and white supremacy sit, is that they sit at the fabric of society, and we've got to change the fabric of society. We
Yes.
need to move from one type of fabric to another, but
Yes.
we need fabric.
Okay.
See, some people want to destroy the fabric. No, that's not the solution. The
Hmm.
solution is to get a fabric that works for everybody.
Hmm. How can we help you? How can we, as Africans in the diaspora, help you? How can we help you with your mission to get into the Congress?
Yeah, well, so I mean, part of it is, a lot of you can vote. So, to tell your members, we need all kinds of people helping. I have people from the continent already working on the campaign. So my campaign is a diverse campaign of Africans from the islands, from the continent, and from the U.S. and from and non-Europe and non-Africans, and we all are working together for a common goal. They
Yes.
can join me at akilkhalfani.com. That's
Hmm.
AKILKhalfani.com. And if you
Okay.
come there, they can get on and sign up. We need people to donate money. We need people to make phone calls. We need people to do all the things for a campaign. We're a small campaign. We're fighting against the system,
Yes.
but I know we can win if we come together. Because
Yes.
also, I'm going to be the candidate for Africa. That
Yes.
is, that I'm going to champion in DC the issues that are relevant and important to Africa.
Yes.
Who does that today that you know of? We
No.
don't have anybody that does that because we
Okay.
don't have anybody on Congress who's a
Yes.
Pan-Africanist.
Yes. Yes. All right. Wow. Thank you so very much. Please, any African in the diaspora, any Nigerian in the diaspora who's listening to our brother speak today, I encourage you to go on, put your hands together, put your heads together. Let's help him get to the Congress so that he can be there as our voice, as our representative. Okay. Thank you so very much for spending your afternoon with us. I'll be
Thank
reaching
you, my
out to
sister. It's
you.
been wonderful.
Thank you. We'll be reaching out to you for more discussion like this so we can continue to learn from and of each other. Okay?
Yes, yes, and I'm with you. And even when I'm here and in Congress, so you can feel free to contact me both before and after. I'm open.
That's what I'm talking about. Thank you so very much. Okay?
You're
Have a
welcome.
wonderful day and God bless you.
Bless God, bless you too.
Good luck to you. All
Yes.
right. Bye bye. Wow, that was a very interesting discussion, right? So we all were able to learn something about self-hate, about loving and supporting each other, about serving the people in humility, about being your brother's keeper, about recognizing that it's only when your neighbor grows then you can actually grow. I want to thank you all for spending your afternoon with us. Keep a date with us tomorrow because we're going to be talking about traditional African religion as compared to the religion that was brought to us from the strangers from the West. Where do we find a middle ground? How can we make it work for us? Okay, rejecting accepting one does not mean rejecting the other, or does it? I'm going to have a traditional religious practitioner, and I'm going to have a pastor, two high priests of different gods, or God we call by different names. They'll be here with me tomorrow to talk about it. I will also be talking about the first female president of Nigeria. Almost. She was almost the first female president of Nigeria. She'll be with me to talk about her journey to Aso Rock. So I look forward to spending time with you tomorrow. Bring your questions, bring your contributions in terms of ideas and suggestions. I thank you for spending this afternoon with me. It was a pleasure. For now, I'll say good night and God bless. Take care of yourself and of each other. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Woo. No, it's not done.